You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Good evening. My name is Peter Basserman. I chair the Branford Inland Wetland Commission. Today is June 27th, 2024. It is 7 o'clock. And we're going to have a regularly scheduled meeting of the Branford Inland Wetland Commission. The meeting is being conducted on the Zoom platform in accordance with Public Act 22-3. I think for the foreseeable future, we will continue to have our inland wetland meetings via this virtual platform. The BCTV is recording this evening. We're certainly grateful for that. When you speak, please make sure that your face is centered within the profile box for the Zoom meeting, so that the public, if they're viewing this, can identify your voice and face. The agenda for tonight's meeting was filed on June 26th. That replaces the meeting notice agenda of June 25th. Material for tonight's meeting is on the town's website. The Dropbox information is also on the town website so that you can see the material that will be discussed this evening. We're going to do a roll call now. I'll start with staff. Inland Wetland Director, Jamie Frederick.
Present.
Inland Wetland Associate, Katie Blanchette.
Present.
Commissioner Begeman.
Commissioner Begeman, present.
Commissioner Boda.
Commissioner Boda, present.
Commissioner Gokowski.
Commissioner Gokowski, present.
Commissioner Omrod.
Commissioner Ormrod, present.
Commissioner Finaro.
Commissioner Finaro, present.
Commissioner Papatonis.
Commissioner Papantonis, present.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's see. So we have 8 commissioners this evening, and I think let's see. The alternate is that Commissioner Finaro.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I think there's only 7 commissioners, unless I'm missing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, including myself. Oh, I counted you. I'm sorry. You're right. There's 7. Everybody here is seated for this evening. I'm one off. I was one off. We have a quorum for tonight's meeting, so we can move forward. Does town staff have any additions or changes to the agenda this evening?
No.
Okay. First up, we have the minutes from our June 13th, 2024 meeting. Mailed out to all the commissioners. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of June 13th, 2024?
This is Commissioner Begeman. I move that we approve the regular meeting minutes from June 13, 2024.
And is there a second?
Commissioner Ormrod, I'll second that motion.
Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any disapprovals? Any disapprovals with a nay? Any abstentions?
Commissioner Boda, abstention.
Minutes are approved. Next up on the agenda is the public hearing Inland Wetland 240202, 1 to 17 Beacon Hill Road and Beacon Hill Road, formerly part of the property known as 83 Rose Hill Road, which is a new active adult residential community. I'll make some comments about tonight's public hearing. Purpose of the hearing is a fact-finding mission to understand the application for a permit in its entirety. This is the Branford Inland Wetland and Watercourses Commission. We are governed by Connecticut Statute 22A, our town regulations, which are drawn from that statute 22A and modeled after a set of regulations issued by the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Commission aims to apply those regulations in a fair and uniform manner across all applications that come before this commission. Commissioners that are seated for this application are required to be fair and independent, not predisposed to any outcome. Commission must decide the merit of the application from the facts as they appear on the record and from their own personal observation and technical expertise. Permit decisions must be concluded within timeframes that are specified by Connecticut statutes and our regulations. The commission is not an environmental review board. It does not deal with planning and zoning issues. It's a wetland agency, and so we want to hear about activities that may have a direct impact on and either approve or deny them. It is not uncommon for conditions to be included in permits that are granted. The commission has the responsibility to determine whether the application is consistent with its regulations. It is therefore important that the applicant has a full opportunity to discuss the details of that application. The commission may ask questions during or after the applicant's presentation. After the commission is finished with its questions, the commission will hear from the peer review firm who is hired by the commission to augment the commission's understanding of the application. Following that, members of the public will be invited to speak. In an effort to keep things moving while being judicious in managing the agenda this evening, I will grant the applicant 1 hour for its presentation, including questions from the commission, to be followed by the peer review experts' comments. Hopefully that can be done within 15, 20 minutes, and with public comments to follow the peer review presentation. Based on information presented, public hearing may be closed or continued to a future date. I will also ask that each person who speaks this evening identify their name, affiliation, and credentials when speaking for the first time. All subsequent comments identify with their name to facilitate an accurate record. Is there any commissioner seated who feels he or she cannot assess the material presented tonight in a fair and equitable manner consistent with our regulations and state statutes? Okay.
Commissioner Ormrod, it came to my attention that I'm actually more closely related to the applicant through marriage than I had initially thought. So I think it's appropriate that I recuse myself from all matters dealing with inland wetland number 240202.
Appreciate that. Anybody else? Any additional comments from commissioners this evening before we start the clock? Staff, any comments to add before we commence?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I just want to identify that the peer review initial comment letter has been received. It was received June 6th. The applicant responded with some initial comments on June 20th. They've indicated that they plan to respond to those comments and submit some revised and or supplemental materials. So I do think it is likely the commission will want to continue the public hearing so that those materials can be received. And I think without biting into the commission's time for review too much, I'll just mention possible review or continuance dates would include July 11th or July 25th, depending on where the review is after the initial presentation and in consideration of when revised materials can be submitted.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. The applicant now can commence its presentation.
We're on the clock. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Attorney Timothy Lee. I represent the applicant and owner of the property. The property owner is Beacon Hill Properties, LLC. As you may have noticed from the application, this application involves 11 properties number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, 15, and 17 Beacon Hill Road. All combined, the size of the parcel is 7.65 acres. We are here before you tonight seeking a permit to conduct regulated activities in conjunction with the development of a 22-unit age-restricted active adult community. The 22 units will be spread out through seven separate structures on the property. Some of the longer tenured members on the commission may recall this property from a prior application in 2009. At that time, the property owner received a permit from the Wetlands Commission in conjunction with the development of an 11-lot subdivision. As part of that prior application, the Inland Wetlands Commission approved a direct impact of 2,649 square feet to the inland wetlands. The owner ultimately received subdivision approval from planning and zoning, and the lots were created, hence the 11 lots before you this evening. If we receive approval from the Wetlands Commission and Planning and Zoning, the plan would be to combine those 11 lots into one larger lot that would support the development. The proposed impact to the inland wetlands from this project are substantially similar to the application approved by the Wetlands Commission in 2009. Although we are increasing the disturbance from 2,649 square feet to 4,549 square feet, that is mainly the result of a change to the regulations at planning and zoning, which require a sloping ratio of 3:1 as opposed to 2:1, which existed in 2009. The changes to the grading require a little bit of a longer runoff period and hence a little bit more of an intrusion into the wetlands in order to accommodate the 3:1 ratio. However, in consideration for this increase of direct impact, we are proposing the creation of 13,845 square feet of new wetlands and the restoration of almost 2,700 feet of disturbed wetlands. In addition, as part of this project, or in conjunction with this project, the plan is to bring sanitary sewers to this part of town. The commission may or not be aware that the neighborhood is currently served by septic system. Some of the septic systems in the area are failing or not of good quality. We think it's going to be a benefit to the environment and the wetlands to have a sewer system which will serve these lots. So we hope that the commission would look favorably upon that. We look forward to presenting the application this evening, and without any further ado from my part, I will introduce the development team. On the line tonight is Zach Georgina. He is the project engineer. He is from Giuliano and Associates. And we have George Logan of REMA Ecological Services. He is our soil scientist. So at this point, I'd ask Zach to walk you through the site plan.
Jamie, could I have permission to share my screen if I don't already? Okay. Fantastic. We want entire of screen 2. Okay, so we should all be able to see this should be the title screen. Can I just get a thumbs up from somebody confirming that? Cool. Awesome. All right. A lot of what I was going to go over has already been said by Tim. Again, my name is Zach Georgina. I am the project engineer with Giuliano Associates. I've completed a Bachelor of Science with the University of New Haven north of 10 years ago at this point, back in 2012. And I've been working with Giuliano Associates for 8 years. All right, moving on to the project itself. Let's go down here just to walk through. This should be fairly, well-versed with everybody at this point. Just haven't looked through this. But as you can see here, we have the property that is that 7.65 acres. What we are looking to do here is to essentially on center on our frontage, come in here with about the same path for the previous application, which is going to be a private road functioning as a driveway for all of the dwellings coming in, passing through the center of the site, coming up to a roundabout, being able to pass back through, and a dogleg for buildings 1 and 2 to the right. As said, we are looking at having these 7 buildings. We're looking to quality of life wise, make sure that all these units have usable backyards. We are looking at street tree plantings, and as was said previously, trying to keep the intent of the former application alive in this that was approved. We are looking at having a similar style land bridge to cross from one side to the other of the property. I'm going to jump over real quick just to explain why we're doing that to this right here, which is a heat map of cuts and fills. The site is essentially a valley with the central wetland in the base of the valley. We have a northern portion and a southern portion. To create a drivable road to access the 2 sides of this valley, we will be looking to have the road come in here, a lot of fill placed in the center, building up for buildings 3, 4, and 5, generated from cuts of material for buildings 1 and 2, and there will be additional cuts for buildings 6, 7, and the turnaround at the end. So just to create that smooth driving ability through the valley. So going back over to the report real quick, the mapping real quick, you will see here we have areas of impact. Mr. Logan will go more into this in depth, but we are looking with this northern wetland up here. Let me zoom in a hair. We are looking to essentially create a mitigation area, new wetland creation just to the south of this wetland. So essentially expanding the functionality of this wetland, allowing this wetland to then spill over through a 30-inch culvert down through to the lower section where we will be having direct impacts on this wetland here, creating essentially what's a splash pad that will water will come in, fill up. This will function very similar to a standard wetland, overflow down, and we will be both rehabilitating the wetland on the south side as well as connecting these two to improve that functionality of the wetland itself. This area right here we're seeing is a wet bottom basin. Essentially, stormwater will come in here. We're looking to plant the bottom of this basin with wetland species. Again, Mr. Logan will go more into that, but functionality-wise, the bottom of this basin will eventually function as a wetland with water coming in and spilling out. Just going a little bit onto the grading element of this, which I know has been a discussion point. To achieve the as close as we could, similar wise for the impacts, we actually ended up lowering the central road by more than 2 feet. I think it's closer to 3 feet to allow us to try and eat up some of that additional slope requirement brought on by zoning. And that was actually allowed us to pull our slope off this northern wetland, allowing us to create this mitigation area. And essentially that lowering of the site required our basin to get a little bit wider on the downhill side. And that's a lot of what we're seeing with these impacts that you can see with in the blue and the light blue. That's essentially the reason, because lowering the overall height of the site resulted in our basin not being able to be quite as deep, making that a little bit wider, but allowed us to stay further off that northern wetland. Our stormwater system is going to be a series of catch basins being passed through a Contech CDS system. These are hydrodynamic separators. Essentially, water comes in, it gets cycloned around. These are sized based on stormwater flows, not just the first inch storm, but they're actually sized to handle a pass-through volume equal to the design storm for your pipes. So that being sized appropriately, water comes in, swirls around, trash particles, pollutants get filtered out. That cleaned water would then be passed into the basin, which fills up. Our outlet control structure allows controlled flow of water out, allowing us to reduce post-development flows by approximately, varies from storm to storm, but for our site between 8% on lower storms, and in the 100-year storm, we're still getting a 4% reduction versus the current configuration of the site post-development. So a pretty decent reduction in peak flows across the site for development. The basin, as I said, flowing in, we have an outlet control structure. Imagine, if you will, a standard catch basin, but instead of having it being in ground, it's essentially going to be sticking up with a base below grade. We have a couple of bored inlet holes allowing water to filter in. As it gets to elevation, water will enter in through the top of this catch basin and out the 24-inch pipe on the backside, which is our primary outlet structure located here, spilling in to help feed this wetland we are looking to establish to the south of the basin.
Excuse me, just one
Yep.
moment. I'm sorry, Mr. Georgina. Katie Blanchett, Inland Wetland Associate. I'm finding it a little difficult to take notes, because you're going a little fast. Could you, I know that we're on a time limit, but could you like slow down a little bit?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I was trying to go fast, but if you want me to go slow, I got no problem.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. So just, I guess, to reiterate that real quick, the basin again, essentially a concrete structure, a couple of boreholes, so gradually let water in for smaller storms. We get to larger storms, the catch basin at the top would function like a standard catch basin, allowing larger volumes of water to enter and exit through the basin, as stated, through our 24-inch culvert exiting the backside of our berm, feeding this wetland. We are also equipped with an emergency spillway, so if there was to be an obstruction to this outlet control structure resulting in a high water event, we would have a controlled overflow through the emergency spillway, which is lined up with our planned depression for allowing storm water to exit this wetland. So we would essentially, rather than having a berm, an overflow possibly into a wetland berm breach, we would be allowing this water to, in the emergency situation, pass through minimal disturbance to the wetland itself in this, again, emergency situation due to an obstruction. Okay, moving on. As you can see, our watershed mapping here, currently the site is broken into two main watersheds in blue. I'll zoom in here a little bit over to the side. This blue watershed, essentially, like I said, it's a valley. So we have this whole watershed feeding our way into this central valley and point charging or discharging down here into the southern wetland. So everything that's in blue is feeding down here, heading down towards the end of Rose Hill Road. The couple of red sections we have are watersheds that feed to the road itself. So these would be going through the Rose Hill properties, through our current frontage, and then into and along the existing Rose Hill Road configuration. What we're looking to do here on the right, essentially everything that's in gray, we're looking to capture and direct into our basin to essentially control the outflow of storm water. The red area is going to be reduced because we're looking at cutting along the edge here. So smaller watershed would be affecting these northern Rose Hill Road property. Up along the actual road front for Rose Hill Road, we are looking at about a third less watershed up there. And then while the blue is still going to long-term drain its way down to this point, the green area is going to, much like in the approved design, essentially be temporarily detained in the northern wetland and pass through this 30-inch culvert to then join the blue watershed and continue its way down, as it naturally does currently, through to Rose Hill Road. And I believe for the most part that covers the engineering in terms of wetlands. Is there any questions from the commissions at this point before I turn this over to George to do his more wetland specific impact review?
This is Commissioner Basserman. What's the, I guess, difference in height between the in the basin between the top of the graded area and the I guess top of the basin?
So by code, it's required to have at least a foot of freeboard. If we go to this detail and zoom right in here, we have everything functioning properly. Our spillway elevation is at 83.5 feet. Our 100-year storm elevation is at 83 1/10 with everything functioning properly. So we're looking at a tenth of a foot, 5 inches or so before that spillway. But we do have the berm itself providing us all the way up to 84.5. So we have that excess of required freeboard so that we don't have the berm uncontrollably spilling water in every direction. So essentially by design, we've got this freeboard built in that if there was a backup, water would be able to flow up, utilize the spillway without causing an uncontrolled overtop around the basin.
Commissioner Bassman again. And is there anything other than the spillway output to mitigate the velocity of the water leaving that spillway, that emergency spillway?
So you can kind of see it down here at the base of this cross section we have here. But essentially, once it hits this spillway, we're looking at having this riprap line. So large stone, modified riprap the whole way down until we get to where the wetlands formation would be. And then there's this natural trough we're looking, and that trough is this area right here where we're looking to propagate this wetlands currently. So it would be overflowing into this. Water, in theory, should seek its level. I understand there'll be some velocity here. And that's what I was talking about with trying to mitigate any blowback or massive erosion by having our natural low point here correspond. So we're going to have this water coming down the stone riprap, which will slow it down, hitting this low spot. There will be energy dissipation there, and then it being able to pass through into what is the city's property that was given up as open space in the original application back in 2009.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions from commissioners about what I've gone over so far engineering wise?
This is Commissioner Boda. So that detention basin, are you anticipating any infiltration from that, or
So
are you strictly identifying it as detention, runoff, and evaporation?
So there is essentially what we are proposing is the bottom of the basin is going to be wet. In terms of water will be ponding there. Based on the Web Soil Service information, the K-stat value for this is pretty low. We're talking 0.2 inch per hour, so not a lot. A pretty low infiltration rate. We've actually just done some soil testing. I got to review what the results were in the basin to get our actual field values there and how that's going to adjust it. But we are looking for that bottom 6 inches of water will be held until it infiltrates. Otherwise, it's a controlled release of water that'll essentially build up and then slowly release over time until it gets to that bottom 6 inches and infiltrates and evaporates. Was that sufficient? Okay, thank you. Anything else from other commissioners? Not hearing any. I'm gonna turn this over to George Logan for him just to continue through with the wetlands portion of the wetland specific, soil scientist specific portion.
Good evening, everyone. This is George Logan, REMA Ecological Services. I just want to be sure that you can hear me. Good, excellent. I'm not at my office computer. I'm in a remote location. So I just want to be sure that the equipment that I have is actually working properly. Just by way of qualifications, I have a master's degree in natural resources science. My concentration is in conservation biology. My training is in wildlife management. And I hold several professional certifications. The primary ones are as a professional wetland scientist, as a certified senior ecologist through the Ecological Society of America, and also as a soil scientist through our Soil Scientists of Southern New England Society. There is a report that I produced, Wetlands Assessment Impact Analysis, which has been submitted to the record, so I'm not going to go into any great depth. Hopefully, any questions will allow me to go into depth as the commission would like. But what I'd like to do, if possible, is to have Zach stop sharing and for me to start sharing. So, okay, so let's see if this works. Okay. Okay, so tell me if you can see this. This is one of my figures from the report that I just mentioned, figure number 3. And what it shows you, this is from the town's GIS. And it shows roughly the site that we're talking about outlined in red. It shows in a sort of a purple color the outline of the wetland delineations that were used in the previous application, in which appear, as you can see them on the town GIS, and also enumerates wetland 1 being the northern wetland up top here, and wetland 2, the rest of it with two sections of wetland 2A, which is more of a manufactured ditch, and wetland 2B, which has a little more of a natural character to it. This is going to be a next figure. I want to go and do a little bit of historical analysis of the past land use, because I think that explains some of the conditions we have on site. This is a 1965 aerial photograph, as it shows, and it shows the general location of wetland 1 that we looked at the previous photo, and the offsite wetland 2B is in this general location. And you can see there's a fair amount of development on the site, and that will come into play in a moment as we switch to a 1986 aerial photograph of the subject site. You see the northern building is still there, and you can see how wetland 1 is right up against it. You see a larger southern building, which will come into view in a few moments, and another little building here. And you can see the disturbance over the entire site. This is a 2004 aerial photograph, which apparently I did not submit, but since I am now showing it to you, it will be submitted forthright in the next couple of days. I thought it was the latest photograph before the activities on the site were abandoned around 2005. You see this building, which now is just a foundation that's overgrown with all kinds of vegetation. You see that there has been a removal of the northern building in this particular location here, right up against wetland 1. And you see the other building, which has now been removed, and the area has been smoothed out. And you might or might not see the little ditch, which is wetland 2A, right at the edge, which was left in there probably for the sole purpose of making sure that the water can get out to the offsite wetlands to the south. Let's see if I can, there's a little scroll thing that gets in the middle, and I have to wait for it to go up and carefully go to my next photograph. Whoops, that's a little bit problematic here. I apologize. Okay, I'm not going to get into any pictures at this moment. I think what I'd like to do, because they're all in the report that I mentioned, is just go back to this and sort of describe briefly the wetland conditions. What we've seen by the archival historic aerial photographs, there's been a significant amount of disturbance on the site. Under present conditions, there has a field has been cleared in this general location that you probably saw during the site walk. The rest of the site is sort of a shrub uplands with a fair amount of invasives. We have some young ruderal woods in this section, a few mature trees here and there, as you've seen during our site walk, and again, the two wetland areas that we have. My site walk for gathering this information that I have in a report was done in November of 2023. I subsequently have been out there both in May and in June, quite recently, a couple of days ago, actually yesterday, come to think of it, just to kind of review and see if anything has changed, see if there's any other information that might be important to present to the commission. The wetlands are obviously disturbed. This northern wetland has a few characteristics that are important. Somewhere in this location where my cursor is, there's a dugout well, and there's a seepage area. So we have some groundwater discharge that feeds the wetland. Of course, it has a surface watershed too. And then, as you probably saw during the field walk, and we discussed that, this wetland, because of the fact that the building was removed here, has now a chance to overflow through some of this cracked up pavement and other disturbed areas, all the way down to this man-made ditch, and then off-site to the wetland. One of the things that has been discussed by your peer reviewer, which we would fully agree to, is to have a on-site joint investigation of this area to see if, perchance, over the years since 2008 or 9, when these delineations first took place, has resulted in expansion of the wetland. And that's something that's hopefully going to happen pretty shortly certainly before the next time that we meet. Soils here, for the most part, are disturbed, especially in the Central Valley, both wetlands and uplands. We also have, as Zach explained, we have some tight soils with a fair amount of silt, a fines component, which will mean that our erosion sedimentation controls have to be carefully put in and monitored over time, because we have a low to moderate erodibility in some of these areas. The soils are till derived, and there's a little bit of Triassic influence to it, a redstone, if you will. So we have some Weathersfield soils and some Wilbraham Menlo soils, specifically the Menlo and Wilbraham on the northern portion, and portions that have not been disturbed, and there are a few, obviously. And on the uplands, we do have some Weathersfield and also some Cheshire Holyoke, which extends all the way to somewhat excessively drained soils. As far as the quality of the wetlands, what I'd like to show you is this table from my report. What we usually do is we evaluate the functions and values of the resources that are on our property or immediately off-site. As you see, wetland 1 has 2 primary functions or values. Groundwater recharge and discharge, as explained a little while ago. And of course, because of the character of the wetland and the fact that its watershed does have some existing development, it does, and the fact that it's poorly drained in part, very poorly drained in part, and has this very thick, dense stand of common reed or Phragmites, which, whatever we want to say about it, and as far as wildlife habitat is concerned, when it comes to cleaning out water, it does pretty well. So sediment toxic and pathogen retention is a principal function. As you can see, wetland 2, not so much. We have some secondary functions that are present and several ones that are obviously not there. Going quickly into the impacts that are proposed. If you could share your screen again, Zach, and go to the general plan. I'll stop here. As mentioned before, we have some direct impacts. As usually when we look at our analysis of wetland impacts, we look at both direct and indirect impacts. The direct impacts obviously are either permanent or temporary disturbance to regulated resources, the delineated wetlands we have. Our total is 4,549. I might be off a little bit there. I'll be corrected later. Of which 2,681 are wetlands that we are actually temporarily disturbing and then restoring. We're going to also create on top of that 13,845 square feet of wetlands, or roughly altogether 0.38 acres of wetlands will be functioning on the site as part of our mitigation plan. I'll return to that in a moment, but the next thing we looked at is indirect impacts to the resources. Obviously, the one is the short-term impacts, and that's where a proper erosion sedimentation control plan, proper installation and proper monitoring are going to be protective of these wetlands, whatever their functions or values might be. Another area that we looked at is, as far as indirect impacts, is whether or not we're impacting the hydrology of the wetlands. Obviously, the northern wetland has a watershed that we're not really influencing. We might come into a discussion as to what happens during some of the larger storms as far as the wetland number 1 is. But we can certainly say that we're not going to impact its hydrology in a detrimental way. At least that's my professional opinion at this point. Then the next thing and of course for the downstream wetlands or downgrading wetlands, again, all the water from our site that is going there today is going to go there to under proposed conditions. Obviously, there's a reduction of peak discharges, but that doesn't affect the day-to-day hydrology, if you will, of these wetlands. Another area that we look at as far as indirect impacts is the water quality. And I won't get into that too much. Zach has produced a stormwater management report and goes into that to some extent, and provides the fact that between all the treatment train that we have here, our discharge will be sufficiently renovated in order not to have an impact to downgrading resources, including an estimated total suspended solid reduction of approximately 90%, which is the current standard under our new 2023 Stormwater Quality Manual, which came out and is actually active since the end of March. And with a, should we say, period of some understanding that some things that already been put in place are maybe not functioning to the highest level. So we have a leeway until September of 2024. Not for this site. We're achieving the 90% TSS removal and using some of the stormwater quality storms, the 1.3 inches for the water quality volume, which is up from 1 inch with a prior manual. Now, there are some other impacts which we usually like to discuss, and the commission is cognizant of those, and that is what's happening within the upland review area. And we have 2.71 acres of disturbance. However, the disturbance that we're creating is already in areas that are, for the most part, disturbed with invasive species. The major portion of that encroachment, if you will, within the upland review areas for the detention basin itself, which obviously will be revegetated, and also partially for the roadway. One of the things that we have looked at carefully here is what we can do as far as compensatory wetland mitigation. I've produced some plans or in tables and fairly detailed implementation notes for the mitigation. Those have been submitted. They're also included as part of my report. I have quite many years of experience in wetland mitigation. I'm currently involved with several projects of quite a large magnitude for restoration and creation. So this is something that I do. I'm pretty cognizant of the fact that any mitigation project, any planting project will have to have the supervision and hands-on of someone like myself or someone else. If I decide to retire to the Bahamas or something like that, there will have to be someone else with my qualifications to take on the mitigation portion. So with that, I can tell you that with the mitigation, that is my opinion, that we will not have a long-term significant impact on wetland resources, both on-site or off-site. Again, after the mitigation is in place, we will have functions and values that, in my view, will be higher than the ones that are being offered today by the wetlands that would be either impacted permanently or restored. And the reason for that is we have control of both the types of materials that we're putting in place, and also we have a monitoring period during which we can be sure that we don't have invasive species that encroach into these areas, or they can be controlled and eradicated during the monitoring period. So with that, I will open it for any questions you may have. I apologize if I went a little too fast. Again, I'm trying to comply with the chairman's request to be as quick as possible to allow for questions and for other comments.
Speaking of the chairman, this is Commissioner Bassman. I do have a question, I guess, on the mitigation area. When you said your professional opinion is that it would not have a detrimental effect on the wetland, is that a day one statement, or is that an end state statement?
That's mostly an end statement. Obviously, there's a maturing period that happens, In my opinion, usually when you plant, if you properly plant these areas, obviously you have to do the proper grading, make sure that ensure the proper hydrology, which is one of the reasons why someone like myself would have to be involved in order to make infield minor adjustments in some areas where I could have adjustment, obviously not the detention basin. So within 1 year, you will have quite a maturing type of vegetation. I've seen that very often, especially with herbaceous species. Obviously, the woody species will take a few more years to be more fully mature and be established. But it is the third year, should we say.
So as a follow-up then, would you recommend then more frequent monitoring assessments during that first year than an overall 3-year monitoring period? Would we front-end load that monitoring?
Yes, and a matter of fact, I think I included that in my notes. Usually what happens is within a month after the installation of the planting materials, there's the first, it depends on when we do it during the year, but let's say we're doing it during the growing season. Within a month, I will typically return and make sure that the trajectory of our mitigation is going the right way. And then I do an additional one, depending again, or possibly a third one during the first year, depending again when we're actually going to do it. Certainly by the end of the growing season, say the end of September, early October, I'll be out there again, taking assessment of what's going on and making any potential recommendations to things that can be done immediately or the following opening of the growing season, the following year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Boda, I have a couple of questions, and perhaps some of them will be Mr. Logan and perhaps some of them Mr. Virginia. So if you would spend some time reviewing the construction sequence that you intend, just a little bit clearer explanation of the treatment train, your intention for snow removal location, and the planting plan for the mitigation area.
Zach, if you want to take the first, and I'll take the last.
I'm not sure if Doug Anderson is on, but the construction would probably be best addressed by Doug, but I can go over that if he's not ready or able, as he is the project manager and more versed in the actual construction sequencing itself. But let's jump down here to our rough phasing and our S&E plan here. So what we are proposing to do here in terms of sequencing, first thing would be to construction entrance in from Rose Hill Road. You can see it here and in this gray hatching. Let me zoom in a touch here. So essentially construction entrance in, install basic S&E controls, our first staging area located right here. And then the first big effort is really going to be creating this land bridge, because we want that established and we want that seeded as quickly as possible. So to do that material wise, we're going to be looking at essentially doing our major earthwork up here to start with, taking this material. Obviously it's going to, or maybe not obviously, with our staging area, it's going to go through sorting. We're going to retain topsoil, material wise, make sure that it is appropriate, and then start laying our material down here, installing some temporary sediment controls to the south of this, and building up this berm. As soon as the central berm is really built, installing obviously the culvert through. We can't just create a wall without any way for water to get through, but install the culvert to allow pass through. Once we get this central area really built up, that culvert installed, all of that built and established, stabilize the sides, we're going to look to expand in and actually start in with the major utilities, then recutting back in terms of water, sanitary, what have you, start putting in foundations for these upper buildings, because again, major earthwork will be completed in the northern area. The central island will be stabilized. Once we start working in on that.
Excuse me, Commissioner,
Yep.
pardon the interruption, but have you at that point already put in the detention basin as a holding stormwater?
So This comes into where based on the construction phasing and the request from CLR, your third-party reviewer, there's some moving parts going on here, which is wanted to address going to the next meeting with the actual implementing of phasing plans. But there's going to be temporary detention basins sized appropriately to collect the stormwater from this first phase. There's a requirement in the stormwater management and best practices for this that those detention basins do not overlap with our proposed basin. Reason being, those basins typically become filled with silts and fines that infiltrates into the soil. And even if you had a good infiltration rate, you're going to see a decrease in that because the silts and fines are obviously infilling into that basin. So no, the basin will not be online at this point. Temporary sediment basins will be enacted. The major earthwork completed, it'll be, again, the temporary settling basin installed. And then once we get the major earthwork here done, start forming the basin and installing the catch basins and such. The catch basins are really the only method that is going to be routing stormwater into this basin. The goal is we want to keep anything flow-wise, silts and fines, from getting into the basin. Again, we don't want to make a situation worse, because as stated, the KSAT values for the soil is not particularly advantageous in this area, and that's actually beneficial for having the wet bottom basin and promoting that wetlands functionality in the bottom. And again, this gets into the phasing that we're going to be revising. So to that point, no, basin at this stage is not yet in. However, we will be moving forward after this point. So once we start installing catch basins, major routing, because we're going to have to be moving down here anyway to install this piping coming down towards the basin, at this point, we're going to start compaction. Geotechnical engineer will need to be on board at that point, not only to maintain evaluation for the base of the basin, but during the construction of this, they're required to do compaction testing and make sure that this basin is being compacted appropriately. Once this basin is compacted, built up, the controls installed, additional stormwater controls will be built around. At the time for this sort of, let's call it phase 1.5, we will be going in, and that's when these southern wetlands will really be being created. So once we've completed this and we're moving into phase 2, where you're going to start seeing foundations and such going in, that's when we're going to be looking more towards this earthwork to simultaneously be happening up here. And that's where you're seeing a lot of these silt fences and things tying in along the proposed roadways and where this earthwork's going to be. So essentially, once we get over here, a lot of our the central land bridge and disturbed areas as we're coming into the site and to the north are going to be stabilizing. They're going to be being seeded. All these slopes that are not going to be disturbed any further should be having grass starting to establish themselves. And that's all going to lend itself to preventing any type of S&E issues as we go on further along. Long-term actually something we're implementing in the background phase. And this is the joy of having multiple things moving at once. I didn't want to get into this too much, but we are putting a basin, essentially where building 5 is going to be. So while we're doing this, stormwater from this area we're disturbing is going to be being collected into this temporary basin in this location, that to again remove those silts and fines before bypass off. And we're confirming exactly how we're going to go about bypass once it reaches capacity. But that's why we're doing these phasing plans now, to make sure that this is appropriately handled. In terms of snow storage, because this is essentially functioning at, or it's not functioning as, it is a private drive. And it's going to be more under condo association ruling. Storm storage or snow storage is going to be in front of units between drives. As we come up here, the central section of the roundabout, which is going to be grass, can be used for snow storage, as well as the area north of building 7. As we move over here, come on, scroll over. It is envisioned that this area to the north and slight area here with that 3-to-1 slope, again, we'll have some snow push up there, as well as essentially lining the northern side here with snow being pushed during storms, and then beyond the sidewalk back into this grass space behind the parking as well. So we have space available for snow storage on this. Whereas you'd see with a subdivision, easements placed, because this is a condo, we wouldn't be looking at easements. It's all internal to the property itself. You said soil sediment. the construction phasing, snow. Was there another one?
Your treatment train.
Treatment train. Thank you. So our treatment train, as we have proposed here, obviously stormwater is being collected within the roadways by catch basins. I believe there is the discussion of making them hooded and increasing the sump, which functions for larger scale materials. You'd see trash in a more urban environment, cups, soda bottles, bags like that end up in the trash would be filtered out at a catch basin level. It is coming into the context CDS system, which these hydrodynamic separators, let me just jump over to the picture of it just so we know what we're looking at here. Come on, computer, let's go. There we go. So these units, built, rated, approved and accepted by the state, essentially all stormwater gets routed into this system. You can see the red arrow in here, enters in, the water is forced circularly around. There's an internal sump designed based on what your treatment volume is. So your first couple of storms for that initial treatment volume is going to come in, essentially be centrifuged around. As volume increases, it'll eventually get to the bypass level and be able to bypass through while trash is being trapped in the lower sump section. This is good. Essentially, the centrifugal force prevents your silts and fines, so dirt, especially from treatment for sanding the roads during winter, any type of sediment erosion getting in there. There's a level of oil retention in these, and any trash that gets into is being filtered out. And Context sizes these based on the storm flows to achieve that required 90% reduction in the suspended solids in that. So this is really doing the bulk of the cleaning. We're doing filtering up front with the catch basins. That filtering is then coming in here for the bulk of the cleaning into this. And what is being released here does meet the state standard for essentially being treated water at this point. In the 2004 manual, this was considered an emerging technology. Contact over the years has been producing the additional results. And I mean, we've got 20 years of data on these. A lot of towns are accepting these as completely compliant at this point, especially when there's limiting factors on the ability to retain and infiltrate on site. So boom, essentially coming in here, we got the clean water, and then we're reducing the volumes by detaining and mitigating our outflow exiting the site and trying to infiltrate, like I said, that bottom bit of the basin for as long as it takes. There is a requirement in the 2004 stormwater manual that volume for storms has to be replaced within 3 days. So there is an element here with the super low KSAT value. There's not a lot of option to properly infiltrate 8,000 cubic feet of water, which would be the first inch within that 3-day period. So as such, we're looking at pre-treatment and the hydrodynamic separators to do the bulk of that cleaning, encourage as much infiltration as we possibly can, and then mitigating downstream effects.
So, thank you. And so is only the only infiltration coming from that very slow detention basin, or is there infiltration other place on the site?
So, and this is where so one of the rightful comments on the peer review was the on-site soil testing. A lot of this had been predicated and designed around the original 09 approval, and so we're doing the soil testing to see what our infiltration rate is. The information done in the 09 really held the published KSAT values, which is why we went with those, that they had already been established on here in terms of very low infiltration rate. So I'm hoping that our actual results, when I get a chance to look into those, like I said, they were quite literally done Monday. I got the results Tuesday. I haven't had a chance to really dig into those before tonight's meeting, but see what those results are, and hopefully I can increase the infiltration on that. But to answer your question, yes, the bottom of the basin is the only infiltration we can guarantee on site right now.
This is Commissioner Begemon, if Commissioner Boda is satisfied. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bangman, I have a question about, and it's probably to the engineer and to the soil scientist. So that culvert, that 30-inch culvert going from 1 to 2 is how many feet long?
I'd have to hold on. Let me do some math. I don't have that exact number in
Well,
front of me.
It's pretty long. Let's just say that. So my question is, were alternatives for conveying that water from 1 to 2 above ground considered? You're building an earth island or whatever you called it in the middle.
Yep.
And it would be better for the water course to be above ground than underground.
So to be perfectly transparent on that matter, the intent of this entire plan was to try and mimic what was approved on the existing approval. And there was rationale, reason, and review about why a 30-inch culvert was utilized for this land bridge on the previous application. And this, we mimicked that design, that approved design, as closely as possible in terms of the functionality of transporting that water through. Two things that I am aware of that I personally thought of while doing this. There is a significant, with the limitation of the 3-to-1, being able to drop from a safe flood elevation that we've got the current buildings at, which is north of elevation 90, to hit down to elevation 86, 85, where this wetland currently is on the backside. That's going to take a significant slope. So for every 1 foot vertically we wanted to travel, we would need essentially 3 feet horizontally on both sides of that open trough. In addition to that, this site, it's a valley that's transmitting water through. The northern wetlands up at elevation 85, the southern wetland hits, I believe, let me zoom in and get you the exact number here. We're hitting an elevation 76. So we're looking at 10 foot of elevation across this. Hold on, let me just get you the actual number here. 88 feet. And the other pipe is called out down here at, so over 2, and it's a little bit less, let's call it 220 feet. We're dropping 10 feet in elevation. There's a lot to be concerned about with trying to get a road to cross that as well. And bottom line, crossing this, we're going to need some kind of culvert at some point. But again, we tried to mimic the existing approval as closely as possible with the methodology.
This is Commissioner Goklowski.
Mm-hmm.
And my comment is going to be directed to the presenters. We've stated earlier on when you first presented this project to us that we cannot base the previous approval for a couple reasons. Number one, regulations have changed since that original approval. Number two, this is a totally new application. And number three, this is a totally new project. Has nothing to do with a subdivision. It has to do with a condominium complex. I'm not saying I'm against this project, but I would appreciate that if you could refrain from referring to the previous approval, because it really has no basis on the decisions that we have to make on this particular application, because we're not approving the old application. We're approving the new application. Thank you.
It's hard to explain the justification of why a decision was made without referencing why the decision was made. So I understand that this needs to stand on its own legs. I do understand that. But when asked for the mentality of why a decision was made, and it's a reference to the approved application, that's going to be the answer. And I think that's a reasonable answer to honestly tell the commission why a decision was made.
This is Commissioner Boda again. If Mr. Logan, if you can talk about the planting for the mitigation, please.
Sure, I thought you forgot me. All right, so Zach, could you stop sharing so that I can start sharing again? Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is the attachment that you saw in my report in the mitigation plan. And there's several pages that are, and this is something that I've developed, or we have developed as a company over a long period of time based on our experience. So we include a lot of detail because we don't make the assumption that the landscaper with whom we are working is actually up to speed in some of these techniques that we'd like to see. This is probably the most important portion of the entire implementation notes, and what basically says it's supervised by someone like myself. And then we have items here in preparation on the earthwork. Again, there's important notes such as we're not using topsoil that's already exists there because it has invasive species. So we're going to use virgin topsoil that comes off from off-site, particularly from upland type situations. All kinds of specifications as to what needs to be happen, down to digging a hole for putting in a shrub. Not using, and I see this often, not using mechanized augers to plant. That doesn't work. So things like protection from herbivory, etc., initial follow-up and maintenance, and this is what I discussed earlier, weed control, invasive plant control, and then of course the monitoring. And here's what I said during growing season, 3 months following the installation on year 1, and twice during each of the 2 subsequent years. So that's for the 3 years, etc. Any rate, so coming down to this part, this is the planting materials. Oops, let's see here. I guess I can make it smaller because there's something in the way, but maybe I can push it over to one side. So we have some trees, we have some large shrubs, and we have a whole bunch of regular shrubs, and you can see the numbers there. One of the questions that come up, so 154 shrubs altogether, and then on the propagules, 970. People's eyes open up when we have so many, but honestly, that's the only way to do it properly, is to have, especially on the herbaceous species, to have a lot. Now, one of the things comment that was made at some point early on was why the plans that we have provided don't show the actual locations of this material, say beds for putting down switchgrass and beds for putting down silky dogwood, etc., where these things are going to come. And the reason for that is that over many, many years of experience, because I would be involved, or someone like myself would be involved, possibly 2 people from my company, we like to site the actual plant locations in the field as we observe the conditions and the proper hydrology. So they're usually we put shrubs in clusters of 3 to 5, say 3 to 6. We put the herbaceous materials in beds of, say, 20 to 30, depending what they are. So in our experience, that's what has worked the best over the years as for us to be able to do that. So that's kind of where we're at with this. Another question that has come up, which I might as well vet right now, is why we're using, so I'm going to stop sharing, why we're using the detention basin as part of our number for mitigation. And that's a valid question. That's a very valid question. Typically, we don't double dip between stormwater management and wetland mitigation. We'd like those to be kind of separated. But this is an exception, and the exception is because for the most part, the wetlands that we're taking, actually not for the most part, entirely the wetlands that we're taking were completely man-made and or disturbed. So this, if you look at it from just the functions and values perspective alone, you know, what we're producing in the bottom of that 6 inches, if you will, of the detention basin will be probably one of the most productive portions of any wetland habitat on the site once, you know, the 3-year monitoring period goes by. It's going to be partially a meadow and partially a marsh. And it's possible that one of the things that I haven't told my esteemed colleague, Zach, is I like microtopography. So as long as I don't mess up with his invert, which is at that elevation. What I do below it is going to be up to me. So there will probably be some dips and some rises up to that 6-inch, so that I can create some marshy habitats within the basin itself. But that's something typically that I do. We didn't really count on it at this point, but microtopography is very important because in most cases that's what you see in nature.
Commissioner Bassman, we're at the 1 hour mark. Any other questions from the commission for the applicant at this point? Okay, you guys did a good job of
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Before we move on real quick,
whoops. Go ahead.
Just want to highlight that the report, Mr. Logan's report is for 3 years of monitoring, but the regulations require 5. So I would suggest taking a look at that as part of the revisions. And then as a point of clarification regarding the mitigation plan, is that something that the commission wants to see spatially? I had indicated that maybe not the specific locations of individual plants, but there's, I believe, 4 different mitigation areas with each containing 3 different zones. So just kind of highlighting where those different zones are spatially on the plan might be helpful for the commission to review. Is that something that the commission feels would be beneficial, or do you think that the table format in the report is sufficient?
Commissioner Boda, I think a visual would be helpful. If not the specific plants, then that category and rough approximation.
We can certainly do that.
Commissioner Boda.
Anything else from the commission that would help direct the applicant where they need to focus some attention?
And just confirming, this is Commissioner Boda, that for the next discussion, we'll have a better understanding of the stormwater management during construction.
Sorry, wrong mute button. Yes, that is correct. We will be having completed construction phasing plans included with the following. We will have completed construction phasing plans in the next submission. Those will address the essentially the temporary detention basins that we were talking about, the settling basins. So those will be included in that.
This brings back, this Commissioner Bassman, this brings back memories of a recent development in Gould Lane, where we had over an extended period of time a lot of moving parts, and the storms that came and went created some havoc because it wasn't clear on at the different phases what the requirements were going to be and how we were going to resolve that. So I think that during that construction phase, given all of the movement of the material, temporary basins, etc., we'll pay particular attention to that on the next review.
Understood.
And this is Commissioner Boda, and as you're thinking about that, I think one of my concerns in general, we don't have the information at the moment, but is mitigation that happens at the end, and that mitigation needs to be moved further ahead. It sounds like your buildings are after the mitigation, so I think that is probably appropriate, but just to be very clear, from experience, mitigation that comes at the end doesn't always work the way that it is meant to, and I'll stop there.
If I may just quickly to address that, I agree, and I have seen that before, and that is why, particularly with doing the land bridges, we're calling it, and then stabilizing those slopes, that allows us build that, stabilize that, do the mitigation, and now we're not touching any of that anymore. That's all dealt with and handled, and it allows, while construction's still in process and COs are still being done, that the monitoring is taking place as well, and that's part of why getting that central section done and then working on stabilization and those mitigation elements is where I'm putting it, where it is in the construction phasing.
Okay, let's turn this over to the peer review folk for their comments.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kyle Haubert. I'm a professional engineer with CLA Engineers. I performed the engineering review of the application documents. Bob Russo from our office is our soil scientist. He reviewed the wetlands side of it. Unfortunately, he had a conflict tonight and couldn't be here at the meeting. So if you like, I can kind of go through our comment letter, kind of highlighting some of the major items. As Mr. Georgina had said, their plans are in flux, and they had provided a supplementary letter that they are in the process and are addressing a number of our comments. But I can kind of highlight briefly some of our thoughts and some of what we had gone through and seen as part of the application documents. Excuse me. One of the first things is I know that the project, the total disturbance of the project is right on that 5-acre borderline, whether it's just over, just under. One of the things we do like to suggest is if it is over 5 acres and the DEP, deep construction stormwater general permit is applicable, that the town receive a copy of that and a copy of any inspection reports. Generally, if anything goes wrong on the site, town and town staff are the first call for any residents and all that. So having them in the loop and having those documents available would generally be important to have on file. The next few of our comments in my letter 2 through 4 are all in reference to the stormwater management basin and the construction of that berm on the downstream side of that basin. That berm reaches heights of about 8 to 10 feet or so above existing grade. So I think in our eyes, the construction of that and supervision of the construction of that would be very important and critical. That will also be vulnerable during construction to potential storms that happen at the time. So protection and construction monitoring of that would be critical, as part of the project. Mr. Georgina had mentioned that they had performed test bits on the site. So we will get some real soil data on the site from that. We also mentioned the retention of the water quality volume on the property as part of both the town has their own wetland regulations that request that, as well as the town operates under the deep general permit for MS4, which also requests that. Without a feasible and prudent, if that's not reasonable or feasible or prudent, the applicant can justify why it's not being done and make that argument why it's not applicable to this project. We also note that northern wetlands, they're conveying stormwater runoff from that wetlands through the property through that 30-inch culvert. In the stormwater report, it's noted that the peak flows that are coming from that wetlands. My comment number 14 in my letter references there's no depiction of that watershed or the time of concentration and where that number came from. So we would request that be added to the calculations so that we could verify the soil conditions and that the watershed is appropriate for that area. The applicant had their watershed included the on-site property only and not the additional acreage that contributes to that watershed. We also requested a hydraulic analysis of that 30-inch pipe to demonstrate that it is appropriate for the conveyance. One other note that we brought up was, and this comes into kind of construction phasing and construction narrative as well, is dewatering, during construction. Obviously the site's in a valley, there's wetlands on the north and south end. We would anticipate that, trenches will need to be dewatered, during construction activities when utilities are going in. We would also anticipate probably foundations might need to be dewatered, while they're being installed as well. even the potential that dewatering is necessary for the construction of the stormwater management basin. So appropriate clear water discharges and locations for those, I think should be added to the plans. Most of the other comments, there are a couple of comments that that were Bob Russo comments regarding the flagging that was out there. I think part of that issue became that when Bob Russo and I walked the site, we couldn't find remnants of the flagging on that northern end. The applicant did say that they were going to reset those flags up there. So I think a field walk with Bob Russo and Mr. Logan would settle that issue. And also seeing the actual what flags on site would also be very helpful to review. But some of those wetlands, I would defer to Bob Russo, but I think they are manageable between the applicant's team and him as a reviewer. And most of the other engineering comments that I had, Mr. Gina had said that they are essentially in the process and working on addressing.
This is Commissioner Begemon. In number 19 of your report, you talked about that the Northern Wetland Mitigation Area and the existing Northern Wetland system will be used for stormwater detention by construction of the new downstream burn, et cetera. And then you talk about, I think the response was that you and the applicant were going to discuss this area. Can you just talk more about whether there's going to be a change in hydrology, et cetera?
The change in hydrology, I would like to defer to Bob Russo on that a little bit, and Mr. Logan had responded to that some. Our comment was generated that they are creating a damming the southern end of that wetlands and diverting it through that 30-inch culvert, and then allowing more stormwater to be detained within that wetland system, essentially using the existing wetlands as a detention basin. That's generally discouraged nowadays and discouraged in the stormwater quality manual. So that is why we presented, that comment that they are, for purpose of calculations and for purpose of stormwater management, using the existing wetlands system as detention.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So I believe it's this area here that comment pertains to. And if the applicant would like to have a meeting with the peer review to kind of go over that in more detail, I think that might be beneficial. And that's something that staff can help arrange. Same with the on-site meeting between the soil scientists. I think that will be important from the stormwater quality management standpoint and from the commission's understanding of the proposed mitigation in regards to how that's typically assessed.
And we would be happy to sit down, whether via Zoom or at the town hall with the applicant and their team to review that.
Likewise, Zach George and Giuliano Associates. Likewise, we're very open to that. So we've got each other's emails at this point between the correspondence. Let's set something up and have a sit down.
That works for me. Absolutely.
Okay.
This is
Any other commission?
Yeah. So, is there a prudent and feasible alternative analysis for the filling, the proposed 45, 49 direct impact?
As part of the application, we did submit a feasible and prudent alternatives to the proposal. To answer your question directly, I don't know if they are an alternative to the filling, but we did propose the mitigation in response to the filling and the creation of new wetlands in response to the filling of the wetlands.
Maybe you can, this is Commissioner Boda. I know so I just want to make sure that like, if this is going to be an issue that you have some time to process it, does that analysis have prudent and feasible alternative that propose less or no impact to wetlands?
The short answer is no, it doesn't. We have a feasible and prudent alternative, which is the existing site, and we have feasible and prudent alternatives, which are some alternative developments, but all the developments would have some impact to the wetlands.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Let me see if I can kind of help out a little bit here. So there have been materials submitted in regards to the prudent and feasible alternative analysis. One of the plans submitted is the currently approved subdivision plan, which does have less impact. And the applicant has identified changes in zoning regs as a large reason of why that has changed, given the fact that there used to be a 2-to-1 slope requirement and now there's a 3-to-1, so that means more space to create the same grade change. So one of the comments I had is that I didn't see on any of the other alternatives like actual numbers of direct wetland impact. So I'm just going to screen share real quick. So on the current application proposal, we have this table showing the proposed impact areas and giving total numbers. I don't believe, and maybe I missed it, but I did not see that information provided for the alternatives, which makes it hard to compare what the impact would be versus the proposed plan. So I do think that that information should be looked at and either provided or made a little bit more clear. And if the commission wants more information from the applicant, that's kind of my broad brush comment on alternatives.
This is Commissioner Boda. I would just encourage you to go back to our regs 10.2. We go through those very, very carefully when making a determination, and I would like to see a complete application. And so please just make sure that you are well versed and are meeting those criteria. So, yeah. Just take a look at those and make sure that you've submitted what you need to, and like in earnest, not the 2009, but something that is showing less or no impact.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we've got 2 out of 3, and at this point, is there any member on the call this evening from the public that needs to make a comment this evening? Looks like we're not going to be. Looks like we're going to be extending this decision. So if you can only make tonight, I guess it's time to comment. Do we have anybody that wishes to comment this evening? Okay. I think we collectively owe ourselves a round of applause to say we were able to complete this within the 1.5-hour time frame. I appreciate all your diligence in that regard. Now, Jamie at the beginning of the meeting mentioned if we were to continue this, there were 2 possible dates. Jamie, can you refresh my memory on those dates?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Either of the July meeting dates would fall within the time frame. So July 11th or July 25th. I think July 11th might be a little bit quick to get all the materials received, reviewed by the peer review, and for the applicant to have seen that review. So it might make sense to wait until the 25th unless there's anything that the commission is thinking they need to see sooner rather than later.
On behalf of the applicant, we would request the 25th if that is of assistance.
I think it makes ultimate sense that we not shoot ourselves in the foot trying to get this thing too early and be scrambling around on the earlier date. So yeah, 25th, I think makes a lot of sense.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent, just kind of for an overall picture for the commission. Any continuance after that date would need consent from the applicant for an extension. The only other regularly scheduled meeting that has not been canceled within that timeframe would be the August 22nd meeting. So it could be continued if needed and the applicant consents one more time. So yeah, I think July 25th makes sense. That way we can get some of the other stuff hopefully moving forward on the agenda and have everything ready for review at the 25th.
Jamie, this Commissioner Boda, do you need a motion to table to the 25th?
To continue, yes.
Continue. I will make a motion that we continue. Oh my gosh. Inland Wetland 240202 1 through 17 Beacon Hill Road. The public hearing to July 25th, regularly scheduled meeting.
Commissioner Gokowski, I second that.
Any discussion? Guess we'll take a vote. Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Panaro,
Commissioner Panaro, aye.
Commissioner Gokowski,
Commissioner Gokowski, aye.
Commissioner Papantonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Amrod. Oh, you recused yourself. I'm sorry. Commissioner Basserman,
Yes.
aye. Caught myself there. Thank you. All right. See you guys on the 25th.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you very much for your time.
Next up, application for review 240501 is tabled to the July 11th meeting. I don't think we need to have any discussion this evening. Was this just a information, not receiving the information, or was there something else behind this one, Jamie?
Chairman, sorry, this is Commissioner Boda. It just occurred to me, we just set that aside, but I don't know that you ever put our CV on the record for the public hearing. So can we just put a note to
It's there.
It's in there.
Okay.
In the Dropbox, I think.
It's in
yes?
the Dropbox, but like Amy had referred to, or you had referred to just kind of making note of it, but we hadn't done that verbally. So, okay, never mind.
Jamie, back to item 3 on the agenda. Is there any rationale for this being tabled?
The applicant is looking to do the test pits that were discussed at the last meeting and
Great.
respond to comments.
Okay. Next, we have a jurisdictional ruling request, JR 2403 34 Howard Avenue, the foundation repair work. Jamie, I turn that over to you.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So I was recently reached out to with or inquiry as to whether or not a permit was required to do some foundation repair work at 34 Howard Ave. After some preliminary questions, I suggested that a jurisdictional ruling request may be appropriate. And of course, I just closed out of everything. So give me a second while I try and pull everything up. Okay. And I believe we have the contractor and potentially the property owner on the call this evening. So is everyone seeing the jurisdictional ruling request form?
Yes.
Yes.
So brief description of the activity: remove loose rock and soil under existing footing, support existing structural beams supporting house, drill dowels into existing rock, and extend per plans, install new mud slab to finish off washed out area, including stone and concrete, existing concrete walk outside to remain. And then I'm gonna jump down to the detail that was provided. Which by and large shows a majority of the activity would be interior, which was supported by questions and responses via email. There is some activity outside to make sure that the full extent of the repair is complete. I do have some more information on that, and or if the commission wants, I can hand it over to the contractor to provide more information on the extent of the activity. And I think the relevant section for consideration is 41C, uses incidental to the enjoyment or maintenance of residential property, such property defined as equal to or smaller than the largest minimum residential lot size permitted anywhere in the municipality and containing a residence. Such incidental uses shall include maintenance of existing structures and landscaping, but shall not include removal or deposition of substantial amounts of material from or into a wetland or watercourse, or diversion or alteration of a watercourse.
I guess this is Commissioner Bassman. I guess just a brief comment from the contractor on the exterior portion and how that would be conducted might be helpful.
I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can, or actually, can I see if they're still on the call?
But this is the one moment where the two of them are going to be together, and so the impressions that are set tonight, I think, are going to linger longer than they would normally linger.
TV on?
And are not going to be able to see fancy graphics. Still, the whiteboard makes it.
Mine's is a college. Right, yeah, a little bit. Basically, that it would go away. It didn't happen.
Mr. Coughlin, are you?
I'm on.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Dan Coughlin, DC Corp, the general contractor. We're proposing to install the new foundation wall to supplement the existing wall that was compromised from previous erosion. All the work is contained in the basement on the south side of the house, abutting 38 Howard. There's minimal soil removals or loose impediments. Literally a few yards of material maybe have to be scraped off to get to the ledge. Once we get to the ledge and clean it, it's basically drilling, setting the rebar 24 inches on center along the ledge, and then basically there'll be 3 horizontal bars tied to those, and then just basically form up and pour that wall. All the work is contained in the basement. Under this scope of work, it would just be repair, and then just pour where the soils or the concrete or the floor was disturbed, re-pour a rat slab to just cover over what was there. But that's basically the scope of the work, right? Per that detail, it's pretty simple.
Commissioner Bassman, no equipment on the outside?
No. Nope, there'll be no equipment on site. There's There'll be some, a few yards of stuff that we'll pull out of there and we'll get it off-site, but we're not proposing any equipment. When I pour concrete, I'll have to get a pump truck in the front. I got to pump this wall because I can't get down to there with any equipment. There's not enough room. So when we pour, we'll pump it from the front. We'll load and pump out of the front. And that's it. Basically, that's it. It's pretty cut and dry.
This is a place to project confidence in your competence.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jim, you want to put up the reg again, 4.1?
President Biden is going to go back to this negotiation in the Senate, the bipartisan legislation that never came to be, and then he's going to say what he's doing now. The question is whether former president is going to.
I guess C is the critical element, right? Do we consider this to be the maintenance of an existing structure?
People were talking about former President Trump is considering for vice president.
It's certainly the repair and the maintenance. It's not new. You know what I mean? We're repairing an existing wall,
Only point that some Democrats make. It'll be interesting to see how President Biden makes.
and we're not altering any water course, so we're not getting into any water course alteration or diversion.
This is Commissioner Boda. I would say that this falls under 4.1C as permitted use as of right. Do we need a full motion?
One last thing.
Would you like one? I can make one. Mr. Coughlin, would you please mute your television? Okay. I'd like to make a motion that JR 240603 34 Howard Avenue foundation repair work be recognized as a permitted use as of right under 4.1C. Uses incidental to the enjoyment or maintenance of residential property.
Commissioner Papantonis, second.
Anybody disagree with that motion? Need further discussion? Okay. Commissioner Papantonis?
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Gokowski?
Commissioner Gokowski, aye.
Commissioner Finaro?
Commissioner Finaro, aye.
Commissioner Armrod?
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
Commissioner Begeman?
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Boda?
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. I think I got everybody. Okay. Moving on to item 5. Cease and correct 240601 38 Howard Avenue, the retaining wall and associated activities. This is the just cause hearing as we issued the cease and correct as a result of the last regular meeting of the commission. Jamie, do you want to add anything to the cease and correct 240601?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So, some language was kind of discussed at the last meeting regarding the consideration of whether or not to issue the order. I drafted up a full order based off of that discussion, which is before the commission for consideration. This evening is the just cause, also known as show cause hearing, where the recipient of the order has the ability to present why the order should not remain in effect if they have anything to present. There has been a letter submitted regarding the order that was issued. The issue is in effect until the commission makes a decision whether to uphold and modify, or overturn. So I think I will defer to whether or not the commission has any questions, or if the commission wants to hear from the recipient of the order.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Just for reference, for those that have the regulations, we're in 14.4 in terms of the cease and correct and what the responsibilities of the commission are and the timeframes associated with that. But I think it would be helpful to turn it over to, or I guess, is the letter in the Dropbox? The letter's in the Dropbox, correct?
Yes, everything's in the drop.
Why don't we first just post that letter?
Sure.
Screen share that. Can we scroll that, Jamie? I think we keep scrolling. This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, the September date that was decided at the last meeting, how much of that had to do with the planting season as to why we picked the end of September date?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think that had a lot to do with it. That and the consideration of the fact that it would likely need zoning approval and the timing of that. Because I knew that zoning took the month of August off. I did not realize at the time that they were only meeting once in July.
But I guess this Commissioner Bassman again, I guess to the extent that we don't get this into September, then we run the risk of not getting it in at all in 2024 is I guess the conclusion, no?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I mean, you could still plant in October.
I'm just thinking if P&Z doesn't meet in August and we want to give some leeway in terms of the September schedule for P&Z, if we can still get the planning in 2024, I think that should be the objective, not to push this to the following year. And I guess to the extent that we have a cease and correct that according to 14.4 we can modify to the October date. Is that a reasonable compromise given the scheduling issues associated with the agency that needs to grant approval here?
Mr. Chairman, there's
a question on the table here. Hold off, please. Jamie?
Well, I think that there's other concerns identified in the letter regarding time frame. So I don't know if you want to hear from the author of the letter regarding those concerns. I think that might be appropriate.
Attorney Shansky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a show cause hearing, after all. This is Attorney Marjorie Shansky. I represent Kim McCabe and Charlie Watts, 38 Howard Avenue. And I have expressed myself in the letter. Thank you for reading it. It is my position and belief that zoning relief, and I had this conversation with Evan Brining yesterday. Miss Ellis has been in and out ill and was unavailable to speak with. I don't think any zoning relief was necessary to plant the nanny berries, which my client ordered and then had to, cancel. So if planting is your main objective, I don't see any impediment to that occurring. The planting of the recommended vegetation adjacent to the watercourse. I think everything else is governed by the court. Since submitting this letter, the court, the motion for permission does now appear on the July 8th short calendar. I do not have an appearance in that litigation, but I spoke with counsel today who does have an appearance in that litigation. The appearance of the matter on the short calendar on July 8th does not mean there will be a decision on July 8th. It means that July 8th, or actually the Friday before, is the date by which any objection or request for oral argument, this being part of a litigation, so there being two parties, at least to the fray. If there is a request to argue the motion that's been filed, that will not occur until August. And if it is heard, if there were an argument, and if it is heard in August, the judge has 120 days to issue a ruling. All of that is out of our control. It is also the case that the judge who imposed the temporary restraining order has retired, and I'm told, I don't know this to be accurate, so it's probably not relevant that he's left the state, but he's retired. So this is going to be in front of a new judge, and it may be the new judge who seeks to have oral argument because he's got a big, thick file that is a predicate or that is that occurred prior to the receipt of that order. This is simply all by way of saying, on the one hand, September 30th to complete the work under the permit that was issued on May 23rd is impossible. That if the prime objective of the Wetlands Commission is the activity that is protective of the wetlands, which I am reminding you, the opinion of 3 soil scientists and your own decision, recognize that this has not been an impact activity. So this is prophylactic, desirable, happy to do it. If that's your primary immediate objective, then let's focus on that. But with respect to a time limit that is artificial and impractical and literally impossible because we can't anticipate it. It's in the hands of others than ourselves, including the Planning and Zoning Commission, which again, if we are able to file this application by the 17th, they'll receive it on the 18th and they'll schedule it for public hearing because it's a special permit in September. So we have both hands tied behind our back. I would also argue that the chronology suggests and demonstrates a bona fide interest in my client in doing the work now, notwithstanding that she has a long permit. You, the agency, the commission, will not lose your capacity to issue a cease and correct order. You can do other kinds of things like require us to report to you on a weekly basis the status of the commission, the status of the court, the status of the work. We are attempting to do that which we are now permitted to do, but we cannot unilaterally embark on it. So the three alternatives, as I've summarized in my letter, are: don't have a cease and correct order right now. Keep your eye on us. We will help you keep your eye on us. Number 2, adjust it. Adjust it to accurately reflect and reasonably reflect a legitimate and practical time in which to accomplish it. And the other thing that I referenced in the letter, and that is a part of your approval, is that you've required a bond, which stands as prophylactic security for the performance of the work. So you have lots of options. You lose none of them by having something more of a collaboration in effectuating the results of the activity defined in the permit. But at the very least, put a reasonable time on it, because otherwise we will spend our time cluttering your agenda and spending my client's money to come back to you and more formally, but persistently likely, requesting additional time because either the court or the commission has not given us the permission we need to do the work we want to do, need to do.
Well, I guess my comment would be that the commission has issued a cease and correct and an order in a cease and correct to do the work. We are blind to the justice system. We are certainly, if an order were to come out from the courts, we would obviously obey it. But right now, our jurisdiction is narrow. It doesn't involve the courts in this process. And we have a cease and correct order that we are looking to move forward with.
Mr. Chairman, when my client contacted Ms. Frederick and said, I want to know how to do the planting, I want to know how to post the bond, and she ordered the plants and Ms. Frederick said, don't plant them. What am I to do with reconciling our intention and our action with being stopped by the wetland officer from doing that which you are telling us we have to do under penalty of whatever?
I think there was a comment other than don't do it. There was a rationale. Jamie, you want
Don't
to
need
expand?
zoning relief to plant nanny berries.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. For clarity, just a little bit of added clarity. I had brought up the fact that there were some permit conditions that needed to be implemented before plantings could occur. Revised plans to be submitted and reviewed, the bond to be submitted. We actually didn't discuss the bond when I talked on the phone, and I do plan on following up with some written information regarding the bond submission. And I mentioned that the permit holder might want to contact planning and zoning about whether or not that would be part of any review required by zoning. And I also stated that I did not know how it pertained to the court order. So I suggested that she might want to reach out to other parties. And I mentioned concern about having plants that would not be in the ground. And I didn't want her to have plants that would end up in poor shape. So
we have a 5-year obligation to restore them or replant them or replace them under your own monitoring. So that's a risk that we'll bear. But if the September 30th date is relating to the planting, because really that's the wetland element, then let us do it.
This is Commissioner Goklowski. Again, Attorney Shiansky, with all due respect, we wouldn't be here right now if your client did what they were supposed to do in the first place and notify all the reporting agencies of the town of Branford of their intentions to do what they did with their property. So at this stage of the game, we have a cease and correct order in place. We're following what we have to do under our situation. So please respect what we have to do. Thank you.
Commissioner Golkowski, I have practiced land use and zoning for 39 years. I have never obtained a zoning permit to plant bushes.
Mr. Chairman, I am a commissioner, so may I have the floor, please? Commissioner Papantonis, I have a question for town council. When this came up at the last meeting, I had asked a question about timing with the court, and it was my understanding at that time that we were to act as we saw prudent and to wait for information from the owners of 38 Howard Avenue as to whether or not they would be able to comply. Am I correct with that, Attorney Aniskovich?
Bill Aniskovich, Ernst Holzman. Can you restate the question?
Sure. My question was, I had asked you, I think, at the last meeting, whether if our schedule was too aggressive, how we should address that.
Yeah, yes, you did ask that, and there's language in the cease and correct that says that the cease and correct is obviously subject to the approvals that the court has in its temporary restraining order imposed on the parties. And so to the extent that the September 30th date is not possible based on the inability to obtain the court's approval of activities that require the court's approval, then the commission would be advised by me to modify its cease and correct.
Okay, so my question for you then, again, Commissioner Papantonis, is what would be a reasonable extension on this given the court order?
Commissioner Papantonis, I don't believe that's a legal question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
look,
it's a question of when I guess my question is, because Attorney Shansky has raised a valid point of how long it's going to take to get permission from the court to comply with our order. Do we then come up with a date on our own and see if the applicant can comply with whatever new date we set?
Well, Commissioner Baptiste, what you have heard is a suggestion that the September 30th date is impossible. If what I heard was correct. I suppose a reasonable question would be, okay, what's not impossible? I mean, this is a show cause hearing. You're entitled to take in information that would allow you to modify the terms of the cease and correct that you issued. If September 30th is impossible, what in the opinion of the people who think it's impossible is possible would be a question I might ask. It's not a legal question, but it might be something I'd be interested in hearing.
Okay, good. And the Commissioner Papatonis, again, in some ways, since the court is in control of the situation, I guess the question is then for Attorney Shansky, how soon do you think you could get whatever permission you would need to get from the court to move forward?
Go ahead, Attorney.
I don't think it's fair to ask Attorney Shansky or any attorney to predict when the court might act. She's given you enough information with respect to the fact that the judge is now going to be changed. She's absolutely correct about the appearance on the short calendar, meaning absolutely nothing with respect to timing. I think it would be unfair to ask any attorney to predict when it will happen. To the extent that Attorney Shansky has represented that September 30th is impossible, I don't think it's inappropriate to ask what she might think is a more reasonable date for purposes of the commission's deliberation.
I just want to be clear on why is it impossible? Is it a court, which I didn't think our order needed to consider?
Jamie,
or is it something else?
Because they're bound by the order of the court. They can't do anything without the court's permission now. And what we've asked them to do is contrary to what the court has told them they have to do. So they're between a rock and a hard place.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
I don't think that what the commission has asked in the cease and correct is contrary to what the court ordered. What the court ordered is that no activity, I'm paraphrasing here, that no activity occur at the site without its approval. What Attorney Shansky is pointing out is that given the reality of the judicial process and the pace at which it moves, September 30th, in her opinion, is impossible. She's nodding, so I'm going to assume I'm not I'm not putting words in her mouth. So I guess that's not she's not suggesting, and I would argue the cease and correct is not contrary to the court's order. There's this question of timing. The question of timing was the reason why staff suggested including language that said that the cease and correct is subject to the court, the court's approval. So to the extent that a modification would be necessary down the road, the commission is capable of doing that. Attorney Shansky is implying that maybe you should consider moving that date tonight. I think that's the question before the commission. That is not a legal question. That's a practical question.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, kind of to that point, I think there's two ways to look at it. One is the general language in the order that reflects that there are other entities that have jurisdiction over the activities. Another possibility, if the commission wants to be open-minded to the challenges with those other entities and timeframes, is it sounds like the plantings along the wetland edge are something that likely could proceed. So the commission could keep the order with that those plantings shall occur by that date, and that there shall be an update of where things are provided at that date, by that date. And then the commission can discuss potential timeframe for completion at I guess it would be the October 10th meeting.
So the 1441, then would be a modification of the cease and correct order issued, and it was issued specific to the plantings. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Chairman, this is Attorney Marjorie Shansky.
There was a question for Ms. Frederick.
I understand.
Just to make sure I understood what she was saying.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Or were you bifurcating the cease and correct or modifying the cease and correct specific to the plantings being done by September 30th, and then an update on the overall pace of whatever court action there is on October 10th?
Jamie Frederick and Wetlands, I think I was suggesting that that was a possible modification the commission could make, and I don't think I would limit it to the court action. I would just limit it to progress.
Yeah, okay.
Towards compliance with the order.
Got it.
This is
Attorney Shansky, go ahead.
Thank you, Attorney Marjorie Shansky. First, to Attorney Anaskovich, thank you for your comments. It's not my opinion that the court's not going to act in time. It's my experience that the court's not going to act in time. It's not an abstract concept. It's my experience. With respect to September 30th, that is not the last day of the planting season. So even if you bifurcate what activity you think needs to be completed by when, just in case, when I get to actually speak with Ms. Ellis, or just in case we want to bifurcate with the court, I think September 30th is simply impractical and impossible. And because you're trying to get it done in the planting season, you have more time to do that. So sure, bifurcate what your expectations are, but move September 30th, because otherwise we're going to be at your next meeting asking for an extension, and remembering that the commission is not going to hear this until September. They're not going to hear this until September, when they may or may not decide in one fell swoop, because their process also permits that to have an open end on it. So this is not corrective action that's doing something to cure a wetland issue, and I'm not diminishing the import or goal of the condition that we have no objection to. I'm simply saying it is humanly impossible to comply with the September 30th deadline. And I urge the commission to give credit and credence to the steps that my client has taken in a consistent fashion since the issuance of the permit to try to get what she thinks she can get done. So I would like to see this be a tad more collaborative than adversarial. And I'm not even sure exactly why we're having trouble bridging that gap, given the objective facts of the Planning and Zoning Commission schedule and the vagaries of the Superior Court. My client has best intentions and has and is demonstrating them. Please move that date.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, do you think that either October 20th or November 10th would be a reasonable date?
For what?
For the planting of the nannyberry along the edge of the watercourse.
Subject to somebody who's got more authority than me weighing in, yes, I do think November 10th would be a better date for the planting.
any commissioner feel so wedded to September 30th that that becomes a bridge too far?
Commissioner Papantonis, I don't think November 10th is unreasonable given the circumstances.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I mentioned the November 10th date with the thought that check-in with the commission for update could be at the November 14th meeting.
Does any commissioner feel that that's unreasonable? And then what do we want to say if we modify the cease and correct order regarding the elements not associated with the planting? Then an update on all other matters would be at the November 14th meeting?
Mr. Chairman, but I think that acknowledging that we're waiting to hear from the court and giving a check-in or a reporting date at the same time in November, that's fine, because we should have a pretty good notion of the arc of the motion at that point, or resolution, but not by September 30th.
Attorney Anaskowicz, you have a question or a comment?
I do have a question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Attorney Shansky. I may feel opinion and experience is a semantic distinction, but it might be your opinion based on your experience. But in your experience, is it possible in a case like this that the parties might petition the court through the clerk or otherwise to move this up with respect to the timing of its action? I mean, I know it's we can sit here and say, well, we're just waiting on the court, but in my experience, limited as it is when compared to yours, we have had occasion to ask a court to move something with a little more urgency based on circumstances. Is that something that you think could happen in this case? Not that September, I'm not trying to argue September 30th is therefore a valid date. I'm simply saying, isn't it also possible that we're not simply in a situation here where we're waiting on the court if we don't want to wait on the court?
Thank you. This is Marjorie Shansky. It depends, because I don't know if you've looked at the case detail in this matter, but this new judge has a big task coming up to speed on the voluminous pleadings that have preceded his or her entry into the case. I agree that one can seek to have some level of expedition. Again, I don't have an appearance in this case, so it won't be me. But I do think that the practical realities is that we still don't know the arc, because we don't know if an objection is going to be filed, which would be counterproductive, but not surprising. And we don't know if the court itself is going to request oral argument. So it just can't say right now. But the point is well taken, that to the extent that one could ask for it to be expedited or scheduled with some expedition, absolutely that can occur. September 30th is still too soon.
Thanks.
This is Commissioner Goklowski again. We've made many concessions on this whole project since its inception. We already have in the language in our request that if anything changes, that we left an open door, that if we have to modify it, we can. I think we should leave the order standing alone and let the parties work towards their own resolution instead of asking us to continue to fix their resolutions or change the resolutions for their needs. And I think they should work in favor of the commission and get the job done and petition the court like Attorney Anaskowicz requested. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Marjorie Shansky, perhaps the commissioner does not understand the significance of a temporary restraining order.
I'm not going to
Attorney
venture.
Chansky, I do understand the significance and I understand the severity of this whole matter on both sides of the aisle and the commission's position. I think at this stage of the game, we did leave an open possibility that if an extension needed to be granted, it could be granted. And we should just go with the September 30th date like we originally started. And you start doing some legwork to get the job done.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. I do think that there is sense in listening to timeframes needed. It's not really worth anyone's time to meet to say we need an extension when perhaps that can be avoided by waiting an extra month and a half, really just an extra month. Unless and there's nothing to say that the plantings won't necessarily be done before they're checking in with the commission. It's just that that's the deadline for it to be completed by. And for them
This is Commissioner Boda. I would like to make a motion, please. I think that we are at least we may not have a consensus, but I think that we are close enough and we can move forward. We've been discussing this item maybe for longer than the public hearing tonight. So that being said, I would like to amend the cease and correct to the November
14th.
The 10th, and then the 14th in 2024. And at that time, we will also hear an update from Attorney Shansky and the property owners with the progress that has been made or where the courts are.
Commissioner Papantonis, second.
Right. Okay, now discussion. I guess on that motion, Commissioner Boda, the 14th was the date where we would get an update. Jamie had suggested November 10th as an extension from the September 30th date. Is that part of the motion?
I would gladly take that as a revision to the motion. So we're
friendly amendment.
10th and update by the 14th.
Jamie Frederick,
Second.
Wetland agent. For clarification, the November 10th deadline is for the planting of the Nannyberry along the edge of the wetland.
Yes.
Commissioner Papantonis, that second still stands?
Still stands.
Okay. We'll take a vote. Commissioner Boda?
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Armrod?
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
Commissioner Goklowski?
Commissioner Goklowski, nay.
Commissioner Papantonis?
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Finaro? Commissioner Finaro?
Wasn't announced earlier, but Commissioner Finaro has recused herself from this matter.
Okay, that's right from the last meeting. Commissioner Begerman?
Commissioner Begerman, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye.
Thank you.
Next up. Cease and correct 240602, 142 Chestnut Street. The removal of the vegetation and earthwork without a permit to conduct regulated activities. Another just cause hearing. Can we get an update, Jamie, on this?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. The order was sent to the property owner and the soil scientist that has been that provided the report. I built out some criteria based off of the report received from Davison Environmental, basically outlining the recommendations from that letter and some supporting details that were discussed in review of that letter at the last meeting. And the intent is to kind of memorialize what's expected, the time frame for the activities to be completed, and I haven't really received any response. It looks like the soil scientist is present this evening. I'm not seeing the property owner. So if the commission wants, I can walk through some of those points. And or we can see if there's any concerns specifically on behalf of the owner in regards to the order, either as content or clarification.
Attorney Yanukovych?
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Bill Anascotia, Burns Lawson. Do you need me on this?
I
Mr.
don't
Chairman?
I don't believe so. Jamie?
No, and unless you have anything as an update for 21 Branford Road, I think we're all set for this evening.
I can report there's no update on 21 Branford Road.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Why don't we, I guess, hear from the owner? But I thought you said he wasn't on the call.
The owner's not on the call, but I believe one of his representatives, if that's fair to say, is.
Okay. Who would that
Actually,
be? Matt, are you the only one representing 142 Chestnut?
Yeah, for the record, Matt Davis, environmental professional, soil scientist, professional wetland scientist, certified professional erosion and sediment control. I actually told Kevin I didn't think it was necessary for him to come, but I explained to him he did receive the cease and correct letter, and I sort of explained to him, what it all meant. And, essentially from my perspective, and I think I can speak for Kevin just from having dealt with him. I mean, what essentially the cease and correct just memorializes what was in my letter, and I had every expectation that he was going to complete all those things anyway. So I didn't see any issue with what was put in the cease and correct. I don't think Kevin would either. I think Kevin wants to move forward with this, get it all fixed, and make the site better. So I don't think he has a problem. There nothing in here seemed unreasonable to me, and I wouldn't expect it to be unreasonable to Kevin.
So I get the bottom line is we don't need to modify the cease and correct order.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. I did have one thought when I was rereading the order. And there is no monitoring requirement in the order. So if the commission feels that that's important relative to the proposed plantings, that could be added for, monitoring for 3 to 5 years with 85% survival is the standard number the commission goes for.
This is Commissioner Basserman. If we don't have monitoring in there, I think it raises more questions than it answers. We have monitoring on most orders.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. It was an omission. I meant to put it in the order, but I did not. And I don't think that yeah.
So this is Commissioner Bona. So do you need just a revision? Can we make a verbal revision to the correct to add?
I think that could be added either as number 6, or it could be added under number 3 as like 3A, and just state that, planting areas shall be monitored for X number of years to report.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I'll make a motion that we revise the cease and correct 240602 142 Chestnut to include item 3A, that the plantings shall be monitored for a period of 5 years. The first year following the plantings, and then every subsequent year, by the end of the growing season. This addition was an oversight and is typical in our in other work permits around town.
This is Commissioner Basserman. do we normally, when we have monitoring, talk about a survival rate in
Second,
that?
and then discussion.
Oh.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, is there a second on that motion?
This is Commissioner Ormerod. I'll second that.
Discussion point, I guess I'll just ask, do we normally put in a survival rate when we have that monitoring
Did I not?
paragraph?
Did I or did I not?
No, you didn't.
Okay, I would like to add to that, that the monitoring shall include documented 85% survivability.
Commissioner Ormerod, I'll accept the amendment for the 85% survival rate.
Any other modifications that the commissioners want to entertain on this cease and correct order? Okay, we'll take a vote on the motion that's on the table. Commissioner Omrod,
Commissioner Ormerod, aye.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Fenaro,
Commissioner Fenaro, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Gokowski,
Commissioner Gokowski, aye.
Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. Okay. Cease and correct, 22-1201, 21 Brainerd Road, construction without permits. Can we combine C and D, Jamie, or not?
I would recommend that, yes.
As well as cease and correct 230901, 21 Brainerd, construction without permits, continuance of just cause hearing. I think when Attorney Anaskovich left, he said there's nothing new. Jamie, can you expand on that?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So, we've kind of, so these are obviously somewhat old orders. One of them has been upheld and modified, and the other one is still in the hearing phase. At this point, I would maybe suggest that the commission make a decision. The owner has been noticed of meetings and has not been attending. It's pretty clear that the activities outlined have been and are relevant and in a violation of the regulations. And if you want, I can pull up the order. We can take a look at it again. Alternatively, the commission can continue it again. With it being a hearing, it would have to be continued to a specific date. If you were to make a decision, I would probably put a check back in date regarding this property sometime in September. There's also a municipal citation that I would be looking to touch base with the commission with at that time. There are other violations of other departments and agencies that are also ongoing, and the department has been working with those other agencies off and on to try and get to a resolution.
Commissioner Bassman, is that also in the courts?
It is. There's a building code and building/fire code violation. So I yeah.
Can you screen share the cease and correct?
Sure. So the initial cease and correct order was issued because there was construction without permits, and the second cease and correct order was issued because there was substantial continuance of that construction after the first cease and correct order was issued. So I'm just going to pull up the second one, which is the one that's kind of, I mean, they're obviously still both ongoing. I haven't been on the site in quite some time. I'm not aware of any change in circumstance relative to the wetland. The last time I was on site, a majority of the erosion controls had been properly installed. There was one section that was not. When I was on site, the soil was heavily compacted, so there was minimal erosion concern at that time. And certainly if anything were to change on the site that I become aware of, I would bring that to the commission's attention as I thought was appropriate. So let me just pull up the cease and correct order as it was initially sent. Um. Nope, this is the wrong one, sorry. That was the initial one, which was, I believe, modified and upheld.
This Commissioner Papantonis, I have a quick question. We put this one on the land records, right?
The initial one is filed on the land records, so the commission could file the second one. I don't think there's much need to because that initial one notices anyone that is looking, and hopefully they'd be reaching out to us. But that is an option. So is everyone seeing CC number 230901?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so got 1 through 6 identifying the additional activities that occurred and or have continued since the original order was issued. And I'm not aware of any additional activity that has I'm not aware of any activity that I can confirm has occurred since the cease and correct order was issued.
This is Commissioner Bass. Can you scroll to the recommended actions? Yeah.
So, I mean, some of these all of these dates have passed. I don't know that it makes sense to set new dates based on the responses that we've been receiving.
Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Basson, go ahead.
The next step then to start issuing fines, is that where we are right now?
So a citation has been issued. We have not started collecting it yet. And that would be part of why I would check back in September. And part of working with other entities and getting to ultimately a resolution for the site. I've been holding off on moving on to that final step. But if I don't want to let the time frame lapse. So in September, I would plan on bringing that back to the commission if we've not made.
Well, what would be our other
Yeah.
question about so if we're upholding and we're not necessarily changing the language, I'm not sure what our other recourse is this evening other than to either continue to kick the can down the road or determine that we will issue fines. Am I missing something?
So the municipal citation process is separate from the cease and correct order process. If you so they are separate, but the initial citation was issued relative to the activities in the initial cease and correct order. So you could make a decision regarding this cease and correct order and provide a time frame where measurable progress has to be made or additional fines will be issued relative to the activities outlined in the second order. And I guess, so I asked town council about updates because I am working with town council on this. So, and that it would be kind of potentially the next step outside of citations. So I think there has to be more conversation on that end before anything would progress in that direction. And there's other things going on. So I'm
sorry,
not
this is Commissioner Boda. I'm really not following you.
Yeah.
So so we have a cease and correct. That is one process.
Yes.
You're saying that the fining, the issuance of a fine is a separate process.
Right. You can
call the citation process.
You can issue a municipal citation or a fine without issuing a cease and correct order. Generally speaking, from what I'm aware, from my experience and review of historical files. The commission's practice with the citation process has been to implement it generally when a cease and correct order has been issued and the recipient is non-responsive.
Is Commissioner Bassman, is that not the case here?
Yeah, so it's a separate process, but it can be linked. So if you want, we can start the citation process relative to the activities outlined in the cease and correct order this evening. So the first step is I have to send an initial notice. And then there's certain timeframes. I don't recall them off the top of my head. But I could start that process and we could take those steps and go through that process with the activities outlined in the second cease and correct order, the way that we did with the first order.
And this is Commissioner Boda, is this a different process than our 14.5, which enables us to fine for $1,000 a day?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So if you read 14.5, it's kind of a general citation. So there's the fines can be either a municipal citation or it can be ordered through the court. So it says directing that the violation be corrected and or removed and or assess civil penalties pursuant to CGS 22A 44B of up to $1,000 per day. However, so we do have a municipal citation ordinance, which does allow the commission to issue a municipal citation. However, it's been the guidance the agency has received historically has been that it may not be that the commission itself can issue fines of $1,000 a day, that might have to be court ordered. So it's been our past practice that it would be a one-time fine for each activity. And the ordinance, there's different criteria. So it's either a $500 fine or a $1,000 fine. And that generally relates to whether the activity is inside of a wetland or watercourse or outside in the upland review area. So for the activities outlined in the first cease and correct order, the fine equated to $1,500. I would have to look at the municipal citation ordinance to see what it would calculate out for the items outlined in this cease and correct order.
So, this is Commissioner Boda. Can we go ahead and start that process to move toward the municipal citation fine? Obviously, we're not getting anywhere with this person as it is. It sounds like they also may be getting hit from other agencies in the town, but that's not the criteria by which we make our decision. So I think that makes sense. And then we can, can take some time to do that between now and the next meeting and we can vote on it at the next meeting.
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, you vote on the order?
Yes.
Okay,
So
so you don't want to make a decision on the order, but you want to have staff move forward with the citation relative to the items outlined in the order?
Yeah, so I'm trying to infer based on what you've described as we need to now enter into a second process because we've done our cease and correct. And now we need a municipal citation fine order. And it sounded like you could take the items from here and determine which items would be a $500 fine versus $1,000 fine, put together that citation with the fines outlined that we could then go ahead and make a motion on.
It's Commissioner Bassman. I don't know if anyone else is confused, but I'm very confused.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Let me take a step back and try it.
Wait a minute. Before we do that, why don't we say at the next meeting, Jamie will have talked to Bill Anaskovich town council, and outline different options that we have to take, quote, the next step.
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think I would say my recommendation would be to make a motion on this order and direct staff to issue municipal citations per the items 1 through 6 in the order. Because you don't need, the order doesn't need to come, not the order, the citation doesn't need to come from the commission, it comes from me. So, hold a minute, let me make sure it's in the record here.
So
if I jump back,
this is Commissioner about it. Essentially, you want me to say what I just said, but in the form of a motion?
And I don't know that it needs to come back to the commission to review at the next meeting. Like, I'm trying to say, you
okay,
get this off the agenda.
I would like to make a motion that we take the letter. Can you scroll up just a little bit to the date? That the letter dated September 28th, 2023 for cease and correct 230901 be transitioned to a municipal citation. Can you scroll down, please?
It's not going to be.
Sorry, can I suggest that you withdraw your motion?
Sure, I will withdraw my motion.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so the processes are separate, but they can run tangent to each other. So there's 2 cease and correct orders that have been issued. The first order has been upheld, and after it was upheld, a citation was issued, and that's a separate process entirely. So my advice would be that cease and correct order number 230901 be upheld.
Wait, 230901 upheld.
And that staff issue a municipal citation for items 1 through 6 as applicable.
I have a question, Commissioner Papantonis.
Wait, somebody's got to make a motion first, right?
Let her ask her question. I'll make it in a second.
Okay.
I want to go on the motion. This is not on the land records, this one, right?
This one is not on the land records. You could make a decision. And I would just say, before you make a motion, we do have some people on the call. I think it would be good for us just to double check to make sure there's no one here representing the owner that wants to provide additional comment.
Okay, and I'm just going to ask Commissioner Bodo, who's getting ready to make a motion to add that it go on the land records.
Okay, hold on. Who's on the call there? Because I can't see everybody.
I don't see any names that I recognize as being related, but I just think it's a good practice to make sure that no one's here for this item. So is there anyone here for 21 Branford Road? Okay, I'm not seeing anything.
So I guess there's a question on the table as to whether to add land record to your motion, Commissioner.
I'm gonna. Are we ready now?
Take it away. Take it away, please.
I'd like to make a motion regarding 21 Brainerd Road that 230901 is upheld and placed on the land records. And also that staff issue a municipal citation for items 1 through 6 as applicable.
I'll second that motion. And discussion, I have a question. How is this different, if at all, from the previous cease and correct?
So this is because additional activity occurred after the first cease and correct. So this pertains to that additional activity.
Gotcha. I'm saying the issuance of the $1,000 fine.
Because they're new activities, so you can issue a new citation because it's per activity. So it
Is the process the same?
Yes.
Process was the same as what we're recommending in the motion that Commissioner Boda just made.
Well, I think the citation was issued at a later date the first time, but this
I mean, other than timing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's per the regulations and the municipal citation ordinance.
Thank you. All right, I guess we take a vote. Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Finaro,
Commissioner Finaro, aye.
Commissioner Begerman,
Commissioner Begman, aye.
Commissioner Gokowski,
Commissioner Gokowski, aye.
Commissioner Omrod.
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
This is Commissioner Begman. Just a question. When we talk about having cease and correct, because they give us more power to make sure things are done, is it the power of fining people and putting things on land records that usually gets people to do things?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, those can be
more persuasive.
Persuasive, especially, yeah.
Okay, so this is just an exception.
Okay, we have no other business. Application for receipt, we have inland wetland 240602, 329, also known as 325, East Main Street, PDD. We getting a presentation tonight, Jamie, or?
Yes, Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, the applicant is here. They do want to provide a brief presentation, per the new guidelines. Just request that it's kept brief. I will just quickly identify for the commission, this is similar to an application that was just reviewed and approved by the commission. However, it is a modification. Before they were proposing, I believe it was 2 new buildings, and now it's split up into, I believe, 4 new buildings in addition to the Walgreens structure and the old Regal Cinema site structure to remain. So without more comment, I'll hand it over to the applicant.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Question, how long do you think this review will take? Given the fact that it was received
This evening or in general?
Right now.
Hopefully 5 minutes.
Bingo, you got it. Go.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Sarah Sharp. I'm a land use lawyer at 135 Broad Street in Milford. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, CP Branford LLC. As Jamie mentioned, this is the property at 329 East Main Street, also known as 325 East Main Street. This is a very similar application to what was before you and approved back in December 14th, 2023 for the old theater property. There were some requests that came up during the P&Z hearing that led to a reconfiguration of the internal of the site in terms of the entire envelope of the site disturbance. There's not been any change, and I think the wetlands impacts are really no change. So this is really a minor revision from your standpoint. The internal configuration is really the big change, and like I said, it came from the P&Z discussion. The one thing I wanted to also highlight is we are requesting a fee waiver under 19.7. Subsection B, one of the bases is that the amount of the application fee is excessive in relation to the cost to the town to review and process this application. Because it is a minor revision of what was previously reviewed and approved, and because the application fee is based on the entire development area, it's over $8,000 for this. We did discuss with Jamie prior to the submission requesting this fee waiver, and thought it would be appropriate because it's going to be a minor review given what the detailed review that occurred before. And so we are requesting that fee waiver. I have our soil scientist, Sagan Simcoe, here tonight, and our professional engineer, John Schmitz. And I will hand it to John in case there's anything you need to add. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I thank you, John Schmitz, civil engineer, project manager with BL Companies, 355 Research Parkway. Jamie, if I may, I'll just share a screen. I'll show you the site plan and quickly just show what we propose to do here. Okay, so you should be seeing the site plan now. Again, very similar to what we had before. Post Road, East Main Street is on the left-hand side of this sheet. Along the top would be the entrance ramp to 95. The green box, the lower portion of the site, is the existing Walgreens. The blue rectangle. Middle is the former theater, which would be a new storage building. The three red buildings here are new residential buildings. And the yellow building here is a mixed-use building, residential on the upper floors. The lower floor would contain a medical office use, as well as retail, and then some community space for the residents. Main change, and then just the other thing, the green outline you see along the perimeter is the limits of the existing inland wetlands. Again, the site's already developed, mostly with the parking area for the theater, and that's where the bulk of this work will be confined to. Main changes from the last application you saw is that the coffee shop and the drive-through is gone. The configuration of the residential buildings have been broken up into 3 smaller buildings, although the unit count did go up. And what this has allowed us to do is increase the green space. So we are now increasing green space by approximately 45,000 square feet, so just over 1 acre of new green space. Stormwater basically handled similarly to the last time. We had 3 existing outlets that are currently in use. We'll be maintaining those going forward. And then the only other item, also with regard to the previous application, we've redone some of the amenity space outdoors. The dog park that was there has been removed, so dogs will not be allowed in this development. And really, that's kind of it in a nutshell. And trying to be brief, so I'll open up for questions, or be happy to answer anything anybody may have.
Yes, Commissioner Bashman, are you using the now new stormwater management guide numbers instead of what was used previously?
We are. So one of the items that new guidelines went into effect the beginning of April, and we are using that. As you may recall, we have a high groundwater situation here, so we are not infiltrating stormwater. So that's not part of the design.
Okay. Anybody else?
Commissioner Ormed, I have a question. The increase in green space, is that relative to the existing conditions or the previous application?
It is in reference to today's conditions.
Thank you.
Does that conclude the presentation for Inland Wetland 240602?
Yes, I'm done.
Great. Appreciate the information, and looking forward to the review.
Thank you.
Agent reviews, Jamie?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I actually signed off on 72 Parish Farm Road today. The permit was uploaded into the Dropbox. This was something that was reviewed briefly by the commission, and the commission was okay with it being reviewed administratively upon receipt of stormwater management information, which was received.
Great. Here's an interesting one. 9 correspondence appeal a decision in the Wetland 240102, 38 Howard Avenue. Nori Sophia, Town of Branford, Inland Wetland and Watercourses Commission et al. This is in the Dropbox.
It is in the Dropbox. Just listed as a notification. Just a quick comment to not discuss pending litigation outside of appropriate. Town council will bring it to the commission if there's anything that needs to be discussed.
Okay. I assume there's nothing on the aquatic pesticide application for Riverwalk that you need to bring to the commission's attention?
A very similar permit application was reviewed by the commission a while back. It sounds like they're looking to switch companies, so it's just a kind of a logistical thing.
Administrative. Hey, before 10 o'clock, that's a
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. That's great. And I think we don't need a second. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.